Hello and welcome, class. This is an asynchronous learning video for you, and it's about performing a brand strategy audit. I thought this would be helpful as you're getting into analyzing your Uber project brands. Here we go. Let me share a couple of slides that, as usual, I'll also post on the course website so you can look it up there. So today's subject, brand strategy, how to perform a brand audit. Well, the first thing that's important is that there is no one or two even right or wrong way, okay? It all depends on the situation, the brand, its development, your team, its skills, the time you have, how deep you can go. You know, if you're a lot of people, you can divide and conquer. You can drill quite deep. If you have previous expertise, you can drill even deeper. You know, if you're short of time, or if the brand is not that deeply layered, it might take you less time, less resources, etc. But I'll show you a way that I kind of grew up with at Procter & Gamble and added on to just a little bit, but that's also founded on a lot of the quote-unquote industry practice. And when we talk about industry practice on the course website, I actually gave you a link to one of the documents, one of the frameworks, if you like, by a small brand strategy consultancy about how to do a brand audit. So you get to see firsthand kind of how they do it and use their tools if they're useful. In fact, some of them I've included in the couple of slides that I'm going to show you. I've also posted a little brand audit crib sheet, which I wrote to myself a couple of years ago, just for a couple of pointers. Again, there is no one right way. Whatever structure works for your best. This is just one that I propose for you to consider. So what I'm going to do is three things. One is review brand strategy and how to audit it kind of in general. And then in a second step, dive in on the elements of brand elevation. So what is specific to or what are strategy elements and executions that are particularly useful in elevating a brand to be able to be peerless and priceless, as we keep saying, i.e. command a premium price. And then finally, just one tool, again, out of many, but I think a pretty good one, and that's accessible online, and you can search, and even if you're lucky, find your brand in and type into the database, which is the Brand Asset Valuator, BAV, at the end, to help you kind of draw a conclusion on overall brand strength, with that being kind of almost the introductory sentence to your brand audit summary. You know, overall, what do you think about these, the brand that you looked at? And then in reverse order, usually in a business context, outlining kind of the key strengths and the key opportunity areas, and then say, that's why we will focus on these aspects as we develop a brand strategy to strengthen this brand and further elevate it. That's kind of the top paragraphs of a brand audit in terms of outcome. All right, let's jump right in. One way, start with the who, is what I was told all the time at Procter & Gamble, and which they're still saying today. The who is the consumers. I personally hate that word because it emphasizes so much that consumption of the product is the highest goal. It could be a service, it could just be affiliation, it could be use, it could be fandom, actually. That is very important, as you'll see, particularly in the brand elevation part. The who is the people. Who are we dealing with? Who are our audiences? Okay, look for that in your brand audit. You can slice and dice them in different ways, and often customers will throw elaborate databases at you if you're lucky, or I would say unlucky, actually, because at one point you don't see the forest for the trees anymore. So yes, you can slice them according to, you know, demographics, attitudes, and so on. and slides that they might show. For example, Pernod Ricard for Avion shared this last year, I think it was, would show you the gender, the age, the income, the ethnicity, and how they're doing on Avion versus other. The important point is, okay, so I know they tend to be male, young, African American, but what does it mean for the brand? What can I do with that? Is there some element in there that will help me elevate this brand, make it more desirable, strengthen its equity, and with that pull in more people and strengthen its business? So ask it from a segmentation leading to targeting, leading to positioning point of view, which is the classic STP that you probably learned in your marketing core class at the beginning of the MBA. And ask, how can they be useful? Virgin Atlantic, as an example, versus the average generic American Airlines. It's a brand in this case, but it really stands for almost anyone, Delta or whatever. A couple of years ago, when Virgin started and actually fought British Airways first, they were able to carve out a very specific sub-target from all passengers, which was the experience seeker. The people who wanted to have pleasure while they travel on air, for whom it wasn't just a utilitarian thing or the cheapest ticket, they wanted to have some fun. And with that, introduce the online bar, yoga, fantastic lounges at the airports, etc. You'll see the story there. My point here is when you audit, look at how do these segments make sense and can be leveraged strategically to further the brand's equity, evolve it, build it, strengthen it, whatever the particular need is in your brand's case. I won't go into that because it's a beautiful, fancy thing that I programmed. I'll do that in the other video. So after the who, we were told, look at the what. The what is about you, the brand now. We looked at the consumer, now we look at the brand. And what are you, the brand, about? And this often leads to the equity statement that the brand has. So on OXO, for example, this might be the equity statement that you will see if they use it still. This is about 2-3 years old, I think, so they might have updated it by now, and they'll tell you, our target audience, we just talked about the who is, our equity, our character is we're the curious problem solver, and all the way up, might remind you of Keller, okay? The essence and kind of the relationship we want to have with our consumer is that this brand enables an everyday that is better. We make every day better. Look at that and then assess. Is it fitting? Is it working? Are people perceiving it this way? Okay. Is there something missing? Should the promise be a different one in order to actually create this relationship? The product promise, the product benefits like the reasons to believe, our tools are thoughtfully designed, etc., etc. As you see here, the brand strategy tools we looked at, Keller, Acre, even Holt, okay, positioning is usually part of every brand strategy that might be shared with you, can be useful in teasing that apart and looking at the elements and deciding whether they're useful or not. Here is Acre, and you can see how from the brand identity to the positioning statement that you saw, it might be translated to advertisement. Okay, if I'm for the sophisticated, smooth gourmet, a product that, however, is easy to do, so I can elevate you to this kind of connoisseur status in easy ways, then that translates to George Clooney, who could be more suave and elegant, and the videos that they're shooting with him making a cup of coffee in easy ways. And then we'll talk about why he's fuzzy and why it's the fuzzy picture they select or not in the brand elevation part of the class. So you go from strategy via the position statement to the advertisement. Now, often in your case, your might not lay open their strategy. Frankly, sometimes they're confused themselves about their strategy, and that's why they want you to participate and tell them about it. So what you actually have to do is you have to look at what they do, what they communicate, how they manifest themselves in stores, on the shelf, through their packaging, through usage, on their website, of course, on YouTube, in social media, and go backwards and conclude what the likely positioning and brand strategy is. Often you can see the intention and at the same time see how they fail in their intention. Remember that Oldsmobile ad that I showed you in the first session? You can see the intention, which you rightly recognized as rejuvenating. You know, this is a young people's brand. And at the same time, you could just smell that they're failing at it because it felt so desperate as an execution. So you can write the brand strategy, the positioning, and at the same time, you already have an assessment of nice try, but we need to try something else because it doesn't work this way. The New York Times was one of our project teams at one point. The team used Acre here, for example, to tease the brand apart, the what section, as I just called it. And you can see here how they extracted the essence, brand as a product, brand as organization, brand as symbol, brand as person. You can see these tools can be very helpful. Choose the ones that helps you most with your brand. All right, who, the consumer, what, the brand, now the how. How do they execute? I already talked about that in the George Clooney ad. You know, how are they manifesting the strategy and what can I conclude for the brand strategy? The little brand strategy company that I lead you to on the website has, for example, this brand inventory little book. Maybe that's a little bit over the top for you, but hey, if you're 6 people, maybe one person just looks at the who, the what, and the how. And if you just focus on the how, you can do this, okay? Look at what are their key assets. What do they say about the brand? How effective are they in attracting the who according to the positioning statement and the strategy you have? How consistent is it? Has it been elevated? Meaning, is it so iconic that just the color red tells me it's Coca-Cola? Okay, just the swoosh tells me it's Nike. Just the weave tells me it's Bottega Veneta. Or is it all over the place and nobody has a clue what this logo or this aspect of the product or this shop stands for because it's not recognizable? Assess the how, okay? Often, kind of an internet image search gives you a good indication of a couple of things right there on the first 2-3 pages of scrolling through the image search on Google, which is it consistent? Do they always use the same color? Do they use the same logo? The messaging, do they always talk about something that is consistent? Here we have Pampers. Consistently talk about babies' healthy, happy development, which is their strategy. Consistently use the teal color as their base color. Consistently use the heart and kind of warm and rounded imagery and symbolism, okay? And are holistically present, whether it's on pampers.com, it's in print, it's on packaging, it's an activation in terms of sampling in hospitals, which again, you can Google, etc. So overall, a very consistent and strategic approach to all the touch points that might be reaching the consumer. You can do this online. Of course, it's nice to walk through stores, etc., but this is pandemic times. Fortunately, a lot of things are possible online. What is nicer in the field, but still you can deduce or remember sitting at home, is whether in all of this action, there's also sensory branding and rituals at work, all right? An example of this is Godiva. Some of you who are familiar with the American market, particularly big cities, they might have encountered somebody like this lady with a bunch of strawberries, particularly in summer, dipping chocolate, dipping the strawberries into Godiva chocolate and selling them. The point by the here is actually not the sales of chocolate dipped strawberry. It's a terrible profit proposition. It makes a loss. The point here is to bring the equity of Godiva across. It's handcrafted. It's delicious. It is an upscale product. The positioning, look where they are here. They're in a department store between Aesop, which we'll talk about, and GHD, which is an upscale, hair tool, etc. At least they position themselves here as an upscale product, being in a mall versus, next to the hot dog stands. You could argue, well, why are they in the beauty aisle? Does that make sense? Okay, so my point here is look at the rituals, look at the manifestations, see what they mean, see whether they work for this brand. Okay, include that in your how analysis. And then finally at P&G, for the longest time, the end of the assessment was ATL, assessing the landscape. That is what you would call the competitive review, the total market review, size of price, size of market, competitor and competitive analysis, etc. My experience is that that's what you're best at, because most of your management classes, operations classes, and so on, dive into that aspect over and over again. What I want you to remember is here in this class, we focus on brand strategy. So while competition, of course, is important, size of the market, of course, is important, macroeconomic growth, inflation, etc., all has an influence. They are not the biggest drivers usually of defining your brand strategy afterwards. Hopefully, you're not driven by just inflation, okay? So while it is important, don't get stuck on just doing a deep analysis of the beer category or, tequila or whatever it is this time. Step back and say, how can I be seductive within that market? That is the brand strategy part. Remember, we talked about brand strategy versus marketing. While you're looking at the how, the execution, while you're looking at the landscape, you're looking at it from the angle of how does it impact my strategy? You're not trying to create macroeconomic strategy or execution strategies in the last detail, all right? So what can be very useful in terms of brand strategy development, and this is again a tool that is actually in that packet by Brand Amplitude, which is that consultancy company that I linked to, is this little 3-circle analysis, okay? Where you overlay what your customers want, it's that red circle here, okay? With what you have to offer as a brand. And hopefully there's a lot of overlap, because the overlap obviously is where what you offer matches what the consumer likes. Great, congratulations. But then you also now in this in this landscape assessment, bring in the competition, okay? And you look what they deliver. And the competition might not be only the other tequilas. The competition might be any social drinking situation, for example, and you might be competing with the rising field of non-alcoholic drinks, which are really hip right now, okay? So also think about that. Don't just think of the other brands, which are obviously a first step. And then you look at what are they satisfying? And you look at what you uniquely carve out. Is it big enough? Is it attractive enough? Does it stay current? Is it still hip? Okay. Do I need to own some of what the others are also owning just to fend off and deliver the basics, which is called the table stakes or the points of parity? Okay. And then you conclude again on the strength of your brand. You conclude again of, do you need more? Do you need to build on something? The things you uniquely own are also called the points of difference. Kevin Keller uses that term in his model later when you look at the whole book. Points of difference uniquely to you. Points of parity, the table stakes, the things that everyone kind of needs to have in common. The most basic things are, it's safe, you don't die from it, okay? But obviously there are other things, like if you're laundry detergents, you need to wash at the end, okay? If you under-deliver on that, you're down and out. No elevation strategy will work with that. That is points of parity. What is your point of difference? All right, and then you have the BCG grid, etc., etc. My watch out here, again, is that don't go too far out. You can do a wonderful analysis of the car market, etc. If the question is, how is Tesla doing, or how is Chrysler doing, or whatever, then you're going to get lost out there. We want to focus on what can you do about the specific brand to help it turn around, elevate, evolve, depending on what the key challenge is that you find out. All right, now that was the P&G kind of approach up until quite recently. But there is a very essential layer. In fact, it's the core, not an outer layer, that was overlooked or only implied for the longest time. And P&G is actually still struggling today in seeing how it fits in, but that's a whole different class. I'm not going to cover that here. And that core is the why. Why do you exist? Some of you might have seen already before or in the reading the link to Simon Sinek's Why video, okay? Where he lays this out quite simply and impressively. That's why he became a super star afterwards as a speaker. It's not a new concept. It's actually quite straightforward, but it's essential. Why do you exist as a brand? Which then leads you to the mission, the vision, the future, the purpose, whatever the company calls it, which is so important, particularly when it then comes to brand elevation, as we'll see in the next class, as well as in the framework that I'll lay out next on looking at specific parts of brand elevation. So this will be a slide, for example, if we have Kettle One this year from Kettle One, and it will say our vision is to embody the vibrant, progressive new world of drinking, and our purpose, our reason for being, why we're around, is made by people who believe deeply in making things better. You need to ask you, is that a purpose? Yes, no. Is it a good one? Is it a strong one? Is it appealing? Is it seductive? Does it point us to people that we relate to, that will become our disciples, that will help us elevate, talk about this product, that will generate word of mouth, that can inspire us as a muse? Or is this kind of a UNESCO, general statement that is not really a strategy or purpose, because nobody would say no to it? Like, we want to make lives better. We want to make everyone to feel safe. We want happiness. Who would say no? So be critical and look at how strategically incisive, decisive this purpose is, and how much it can be leveraged and lived also by the brand. What do I mean by lived by the brand? Look for evidence. Okay, now I know this is pandemic times, so again, it's mostly an online exercise, but in better times, it was possible to go to stores, to go to plants. Now you need to read PR releases and look at the pictures. So try to find evidence. This is from a PR release from Method when they were acquired by S.C. Johnson. And you can see the mission of Method reflected in what you see in the pictures. Okay, it is made by and for people against dirty, which we'll talk about when we talk about mission. It's a broad statement that not only talks about stain removal, it talks about a certain ethical approach to making clean products that are not toxic, products that do not hurt the environment. And the evidence you can see in this company living its purpose is, for example, first thing they do is put a windmill next to their new plant close to Chicago and cover the parking lots with solar panels in order to be as carbon neutral as they can at this point. They also recycle rainwater and so on and so on. And then, of course, there are the symbolic, iconic kind of acts, like, for example, in the corridor, everywhere saying, we are the people against dirty, to activate and remind employees, etc., etc. So look for evidence of the company truly living its why, its purpose, its mission, its reason for being, or observe there's a total lack of it, or observe that there's even a total disconnect between what they say in their public statements or in their advertisements about themselves, their attitudes, their beliefs, and what the organization really looks like, what their actions really are all about. Maybe there's a total lack of actions, or maybe the actions are contrary to it. That is what why research is all about. as you audit the brand. All right, so I've given you this one way of structuring it all and how the strategy models might help you fill this all in and how a little brand agency does it, okay? Again, it's one way to help you along. If you find better ways or you feel like you need to skip some of this, up to you. It's the outcome that counts. I also want to make you aware again that the why, who, what is kind of at the brand strategy level. Those layers are pure brand strategy. It's your job to develop those layers as you develop the brand strategy. The how and the broader competitive, cultural, political, social context are more at the marketing execution level. Why are we then even including them is what I just showed you. The way you express the brand, whether it's the communication or your plant, has an impact on how your brand is perceived, taken for real, able to project authenticity. So we are interested in those aspects of execution, of cultural context. What in the cultural context, what in the category context helps us explain and reinforce our strategy. So when you then in a second stage after the audit go into brand strategy development, I'm not asking you to develop execution strategies to the last point of how much distribution should you have and which supermarket should it be in and what should be the pricing and how often should you launch new initiatives. I want you to look at the how in a strategic context of some of the supermarkets that we're going to want to launch in, or the type of supermarket we're going to want to launch in is rather the Whole Foods type than the Kroger or Stop and Shop type, because Whole Foods aligns with our mission and equity, etc., assortment, premium pricing from a strategic point of view. Understand? So execution how from a strategic point of view, not from a let me give you the execution kind of checklist. How many distribution points should you have, etc. All right. So this is overall brand audit, and what you would do for any brand. I want to sneeze here, so bear with me. All right. I'm jumping a little ahead here to how do you overall assess a brand strength, kind of your overall conclusion statement there. And I'll jump back at that later as well, just with one important aspect that I've repeated already over and over again. So hopefully I bore you by now, but it's important. And that is compare the equity and the image that this brand has or seems to have according to ratings and reviews, according to general chat on websites, according to journalist and blogger, opinions given, according to your own gut feel, just knowing and acknowledging whether you're part of the target or not, and compare it to the desired identity and strategy of that brand. We've talked about this several times already. Let me give you a specific example again from the past. Reebok. This is how they present themselves. Look at the image, okay? You got Gigi Hadid, which at that time was even hotter than she is now, this kind of social media phenomenon. This is the time of glossy and, of Instagram getting big and also of activation of social causes. So she stands together with others for change of the world. I mean, you get the picture quite literally. You can then deduce, what does this brand want to achieve? How does it want to position itself? What's the strategy? We just talked about that. And then you look at the reality. Does this brand really look, feel, act, talk like what it aspires to be? But most importantly, then in the second step after the audit, after you tell them that, or tell it to yourself, if you're not sharing the audit with the client, it's optional, that first step. You need to look at what can we do then? Can we live up to the strategy? It's just a question of implementing it in a better way. And here are my recommendations on doing that. these symbolic things, this kind of distribution, this kind of product, etc., etc. Do we need to change the strategy because we just can't authentically live it? So we need to adjust to this and that way, etc. That is step 2 then. But the important thing is you need to compare the identity strategy versus the image, and you need to help this brand overlap this as much as you can. All right, now the second part. The second part, which is all about the elements of brand elevation specifically, because in this first part, we talked about, what you would audit and do, hopefully, for any brand that you come across. Now, in this class, we particularly talk about how to make a brand priceless, peerless, able to command a premium price, being particularly seductive and culturally relevant. And how do you go about that? Obviously, a key tool that you have at your fingertips is our course book, which goes into much detail about the elements of elevating brands. And you'll find mission we just talked about. You'll find the concept of Uber targets and how they allow you to balance inclusivity and exclusivity and create a positive tension of longing versus belonging that helps to elevate brands. We're going to talk about unselling in the next class, and about myth, we're going to talk about products. You can jump ahead and have the book help you analyze the brand at hand for your brand audit by looking at the end section in each of the principles, which has kind of a little bit of how do you achieve mission, how do you achieve unselling, and at the so-called 77 questions at the end of the book, which have some questions you might want to ask yourself, and or if you can't find it out, your client at the briefing meeting that you have to specifically drill into elements of brand elevation. That second book I was talking about, which is purely a how-to book that lays out the steps, where this one is a model kind of explaining it. That how-to book also will have the same elements of mission and product and so on, and lay out specifically the steps that a marketer would take in order to achieve brand elevation. So again, it can be a helpful guide if you have it, one per team or so, to look it up. And there you will get even more didactic kind of what are the methodologies to dig into mission, to design a product or an organizational manifestation that lives up to a mission. So let me take that as a quicker framework, dream, do, dare, to lead you through some of these elements you should look additionally at or in depth at as you audit the brand for its brand elevation potential. One is the dream. Start with the dream. Remember the why, the dream, which should manifest itself in mission and myth. Specifically, for example, your brand might be OXO, which I picked here randomly as a slide from a year ago or two, that has a myth. They will tell you about a myth. It will find itself expressed in a collection of gloves that they have on the wall and in the development of the product, for example, which can be spun into a myth, in fact, is spun into a myth, and which can be leveraged together with a mission that I showed you earlier and activated. But don't only find the myth, also see whether it makes sense, whether it fits nicely together, whether it helps the brand, or whether it might warrant reshaping a bit or glorifying more. Some brands have a myth, but they're not aware of it. So one of the biggest findings you might have for them is to leverage the myth at hand or to create one. And what should it be? All right. Mission, myth, how does it fit together? And then we get to the doing. What are they doing now to express it? Express it first through their products and services and manifestations, but also internally. Do they shine from the inside out? Remember what I showed you about method, okay? Solar panels, etc. They truly live it. So look at that, for example. Spotify is giving artists a chance to fundraise during the pandemic. could be evidence of an expression of their mission and living it. So we look back and, oh yeah, we discover Spotify has at its mission to help independent musicians make a living, okay? And that is bigger than just their profit making, because it really benefits the musician in some places more than them. So here we see evidence and we see the doing, we see the shining from the inside out. I'm not saying that Spotify is particularly strong. I'm saying that if you're a sleuth and you do your brand auditing work, you might get to aspects that you can help Spotify elevate to be aspirational and be an Uber-Brand, to be an elevated brand. A nice example of a voluntary participation assignment from a previous class, and that's my little pitch here. Do voluntary participation assignments. They're nice little capsules. They allow you to upgrade your participation. They allow you to get a little bit of training and become used to applying the principles, and they help you with the project. So in this voluntary participation assignment, somebody looked at the Stella McCartney brand and very nicely showed how the principle of living your brand comes to life, because, you know, she is for sustainable fashion, for cruelty-free fashion, and all that shows through in the first three fashions that she has in using recycled materials for her shops as well as for her fashions, in employing a diverse organization, and also showing diversity in her fashion shows, and so on and so on. All about living the mission and the myth from the inside out and projecting it through everything you do, from the product to the store to the organization, etc. And then finally, we get to the daring part, okay? And daring for brand elevation, as you'll learn in the sessions ahead, is all about, you know, if you want to be everything to everyone, it's probably not going to cut it. You need to project and create a relationship with certain people that have, at minimum, an attitude, but better, a conviction and ideology that you are about also. We've previously already talked, for example, about Apple being for the creative class, you know, and then the minimalistic kind of design talking to that and fitting with that. And then obviously the stores and everything else going with it as well. You need to find the Uber target here. You will get tired by the end of this class about hearing about the Uber target. Uber target are the people that can represent your brand and create ambassadorship, but also the tension versus the others. So let me give you again a quick example from a previous year. Seedlip, a non-alcoholic cocktail kind of drink, something that looks, as you can see in the upper right hand here, like a gin or some project you might work on for in this year, but is non-alcoholic. And the mission was, you know, Ben Branson, who founded this brand, was all about, I'm a tea, but I'm also a social guy and I want to mix in, and I feel stupid when I go to parties and my two choices are sparkling mineral water or stupid orange juice. You know, A, it's no pleasure to drink, and B, I look like a dork, okay? And so he comes up with this brand. And as he looked at his early shipments, he was surprised that he was shipping to some bars that he didn't note as being particular hotspots or whatever. And so he followed up. And after a while, he found out that those places were places where so-called daybreakers were going. And daybreakers, if you Google it, is a movement where people go and dance like crazy and have a disco rave party at 6 a.m. in the morning before they go to work. This is pre-pandemic times. You can see a picture there. It was actually founded by a person, I think in the UK, this daybreaker movement, wake up and dance. And obviously his brand fit perfectly with the spirit, the mission, the energy of this group of people. And overall, culturally, remember, hold, it fit with this new sobriety movement, as the New York Times called it in an article around about the same time, where people were not necessarily saying, I need to get drunk to have fun, okay, and to engage socially, etc. That is what you're going to look at when you look at daring. You're going to look at the people who feel attracted to that, who can take over the fire, push you further, push the word of mouth, and also create the tension versus the other people that don't get it, that just, simply get drunk, or, this old-fashioned, traditional, unhealthy way, of getting inspired, That is what we're talking about. And as always, if you have any kind of questions, comments, don't hesitate, always contact me and the course assistant, and we're here to help out. All right? I hope that helped everyone a little bit, and I'll see you in class soon. See you there.